Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could, please down below, like, comment, subscribe, do absolutely everything. What did you think of the movie Him? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. And let's just get right into it. Let's just dive right into absolutely everything. This is directed by Justin Tipping and produced by Jordan Peele. We'll get a little bit more into that in a second. And stars Marlon Wayans and Tyriq Withers as both Cameron Cade and Isaiah White. And I'm not going off of an official description or anything off of here, but essentially after Cameron Cade suffers a traumatic brain injury, we'll get into spoilers in a second, but traumatic brain injury, it's at the very beginning of the movie, it's the setup. He gets a kind of second shot at going to this boot camp with his idol, which is played by Marlon Wayans, Isaiah White. And of course, when he gets there, it's a isolated camp. Julia Fox is there as well. And it's sort of, it's a descent into madness. It's one of the closed off locations. If you've seen Midsummer, if you've seen Opus, if you've seen The Menu Sorta, and any of the movies that sort of follow this, it's interesting. This is sort of a subgenre of horror now, where it's the sort of frivolous, eat the rich type movie where one thing is being said. But here, this movie has something else on its mind entirely. And getting into it, I want to prep you guys by also saying that everything we review here will always have full spoilers. So if you haven't seen this movie yet and want to, I suggest that you go and see it and form your own opinion, because I noticed that this movie's getting heavily mixed to negative reviews. It's at like 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's not very high, but part of me also wonders how much of that has to do with the marketing being that this is a Jordan Peele branded movie. It does sort of give you a certain expectation for sure. I think the issue, even before we get into the movie itself, is that there's just no way to live up to a name like that. And also, I think it's a disservice to Justin Tipping, the director of this, that he is now being sort of grouped in. It reminds me of the Henry Selick and Tim Burton thing with Nightmare Before Christmas. Yeah. And he didn't, direct that. He did produce it, of course, and he had some story stuff. But at the end of the day, it was Monkeypaw that bought it, but it was Justin Tipping who I believe wrote and directed it. And honestly, this movie's an interesting one for me to talk about, because to answer my own question, did I love it, did I hate it, or am I somewhere between on it? I think it's got a lot of great stuff in it, and I think it's also hampered by itself a little bit, but I think it's really good. So I can't say I love it. I can say I love individual things in it for sure. And we're going to get into all the positives, negatives, and all that. So I'm going to say that I liked it a lot. So it is a somewhere between, but it's a pretty strong positive somewhere between on there. And it was interesting going into this, because when you go into a movie that starts to get really negative reviews, you start to lower your bar, you start to lower your expectations. And I was really excited for this movie. Of course, you go into everything with your own opinion. You form what you think of something on your own. And going into this, what I liked is Tyriq Withers and Marlon Wayans are giving really, really dynamic and strong performances, especially Marlon Wayans. He's got this on the edge charisma to him that he also feels like he's kind of going to break at any given moment. He's got this unpredictable nature to him. He has this sort of Whiplash-esque thing that reminds me of J.K. Simmons. And that, don't get me wrong, I like that movie more, but this did remind me of that dynamic of the sacrificing your own personal life and your own body, which is what I want to get into later about this, for the sake of greatness, for the sake of being the best. Or they originally wanted to call this GOAT instead of him. They mean similar things, like I'm him, or he wants to be the GOAT, which is said a fair amount in this movie. But then it's funny that the issue they ran into, that Sony, I believe, trademarked that for their movie that Steph Curry is making with them, with the animated GOAT who wants to play basketball. So that's a kind of funny issue that they ran into. And the sort of mentorship dynamic between both of them, between Tyriq Withers as the person who idolizes him, the person that he looks up to, and he is playing it kind of, wide-eyed and like he has no idea what's going on. And what I liked a lot about his performance, and I think it might actually hinge on your interpretation of this movie, is I think a lot of it is really in your face. A lot of the symbolism and things that are in this movie are very overt. But it's one of those cases of, does everything need to be subtle? If something is going for the art direction of being in your face, if something is going for the blatant symbolism, I appreciate that. I think that it would be one thing if it was trying to pretend to be subtle for a long time and then just be explosively blatant in what it's doing. But I think that this movie from the get-go is wearing a lot of its issues and tackling them. I'm not trying to make puns here, by the way, but tackling them with like just head on, like, this is what this is about. And I really like visual style cohesively. And that's another thing that I think is really, really solid in this movie. The production design is incredible. It's a very, very good looking movie. And I think that the mansion that they're in is insane to look at. Like it's so, wherever they're filming it, I believe that they the team that they play for is the San Antonio Savior, so literally close to home for someone who lives in Austin. But outside of that, I think that also the symbolism of the name of the football team alone. But really going into it outside of the production design, which I think is amazing, I want to talk about the negative reviews really quick, because of course we're going to review the movie itself, but I still want to touch on the fact that I saw people saying that like, oh, it's so in your face, it's so on the nose, it's so blatant. And am I going to disagree with you? No. But I liked all those things about it. If something is going for the direction, like I said, of wanting to be in your face, of wanting to have the symbolism and all of its themes beyond its sleeve, why not? I don't see the issue with that. I don't know if it's because we might be conditioned to be told things have to be ambiguous or have endings that need to not be literal, but this was going for something different. And this was going for, I first want to address, I think that it has so much on its mind, which both results in positive and negative things from it. I will get this right off the bat right now. I think a negative I have for this is that while I like this movie a lot, it has so much on its mind, but it's only an hour and a half. And I think that if it were to have been given an additional bit of time to breathe, to tackle some of these things even more so, then it could have had an even stronger impact. I do think, though, what's interesting about this is Marlon Wayans posted this. It was this thing about how he's made multiple movies that have not been critically well received, and he respects that, but they do find their own audience in time. Horror is very well known for having a lot of movies like this. A lot of movies that land in the late 20s on Rotten Tomatoes, the mid 20s, and then they find their audience. Do I think that there's a possibility that this could be a cult classic of a sort or something? It's hard for me to say, but part of me wants to say yes, because some of the imagery reminded me of a Nicholas Winding Refn movie I've seen called Only God Forgives, where the symbolism was also really in your face in that. It had so much visual style. Some people argued that it was style over substance, and this one honestly reminds me of that. I think that there's some stuff in here, since I liked it, I get to talk about this, that isn't going discussed because of how much people are saying that they hate this. And I want to touch on one of the themes that I thought was really great in this movie and how it was executed, and that's the idea of how football players and how athletes sacrifice their body, quite literally. Like, yes, sacrifice is used a lot here for certain terminology here, the idea of football as a religion, which we'll also get into because that also is discussed in this movie, is this idea that in order for men that are in the NFL, there's a fictional version of this here, they will beat themselves and take every single hit that they can sustain for any injuries, for the idea that they're sold that they are, being the best, they're grinding, they're doing the grind, the hustle of all of these things and all of the training stuff. That I think that this movie some of the dialogue is really direct, and you could argue, you'd be like, what world are we living in that people are talking like this? But I caught on to something at post conferences and things like that. I feel like athletes speak in platitudes. They're PR trained, you know. They even say that there's a training thing in this that's like, oh, they're PR trained. This is PR training. It's like, oh, are we not training today? And he says, this is your training. I think that ties into the literal idea of whenever they're speaking about, they're like, oh, I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this. It's they even say this a lot: no guts, no glory in this. And a lot of that is taken very literal. It's part of why he does have this injury the entire time. You're curious what is a hallucination and what's real. We could take all of it at face value, but we could also be like, what did happen and what didn't happen, because there's a moment early on where you can't tell if the characters are gaslighting Cameron's character or if what he is interpreting is literally happening, because they say that there's like a physical happening in the middle of that, and then he's, you know, naked, and then they're like, well, can you put your clothes back on, please? This is incredibly uncomfortable for me. And there's a moment later on where they do the same thing to him, where they're talking about a lady that was there, that he's like, oh, I almost killed that lady last night. And then they're like, what lady? What are you talking about? But you don't know if Marlon Wayans is so caught up in the vapid idea of himself, and he's like, oh, this is like a regular Tuesday for us, is what he says, or if that's something that quite literally happened. And what is and what isn't real in this movie, I don't think is as important as just the story being told anyway, because tying back into the whole idea of their bodies being sacrificed, there's one moment where they're depicting, you would call it like team culture, like team building, where it's a really tense moment. It's one of my favorite moments in the movie. It's in the trailer, but it's this moment where this guy volunteers. He's like, oh, I'll volunteer. And then Tyriq Withers' character is throwing the football, and anytime he goes too slow, they'll hit the guy in the face with a football, and then it just increases speed over and over until he's like really messed up at the end of it. And it's just this imagery where you're like, what is going on? What is happening? That's quite literally like a voiced concern. But then at the end of it, they're all like cheering and all happy, and then there's a moment later where he hits someone so hard in the head that they start to have a seizure, and I'm pretty sure he dies, but they don't quite address that, I don't think. But it's this like really weird and unsettling thing where they're all chanting and doing this kind of like team celebration thing while this person's like losing control of their body while they're on the ground. And it's the touches like that that I thought made this movie worthwhile, because I think that even if you feel like it's direct and you're like, oh, there's no subtlety in this, like this is weird, doesn't make any sense, I get it, I get not loving it, but I also think that I kind of got on its wavelength because of its storytelling style. And what I also really liked about it was, first, it's about so much. We already touched on one of them. It's about sacrificing your body for the sake of entertainment, for the sake of what is the grind mindset really anyway. I have wondered that about American culture for so long. We're sold this idea of, and we talked about this with The Long Walk as well, I believe, the American dream and all of these things. But what exactly is it? They're constantly we're being told we have to follow the grind set, the hustle, all of the mindset things. Although, you know, the self-help books that all these people like try and market, and they're like 10 steps to greatness, and let me sell you this book, let me sell you this podcast that'll make you the richest man in the world, all of that. And I think that this is dedicated to that, but also in the athlete form, where even somebody with the Mamba mentality is another thing. I think that they're taking that idea and sort of trying to deconstruct it, which I really like. You're kind of like, at the cost of what? At the cost of your sanity, at the cost of your body, at the cost of... There's even a offhanded thing where they mention, they're like, I don't ever see my family. And it kind of turns into a joke where it's like, well, if I had kids, you know? But that as well. And I thought that what they show was really interesting. And it also ties into the idea of the idol worship of celebrity and of athletes. I find it so interesting that there's one, I think, really great monologue really early on where Marlon Wayans is talking about how he's like, you don't want to be a mascot. And yet he's still selling him this entire time. It's like, you want to be the face of the team, you want to be the face of the team. And it kind of goes to show that he sort of lost his own ability to recognize that through his own vapid ideas, because he ends up wanting to be the mascot, essentially, the face of them all. And I also really like that they kind of have a weird relationship with each other, because he also gives him advice as well. He's like, I don't want you to be me, I want you to be better, be your own person. And there's a lot of this sort of idol worship of celebrity, of people that you don't actually know. And he's talking at the very beginning. The movie starts off strange. It starts off surreal and dreamlike. It definitely has its one foot out of reality and one step into some of this could happen until it couldn't. You know, there's certainly some mystical stuff in this for sure. And one of the ideas is when he's young, he's like looking at him. They have a literal shrine dedicated to Isaiah as well. So it ties back to his father, who I thought was really interesting, because I wondered if it was sort of a critique on the parents that, you know how they talk about pageant moms and stuff like that, but with a dad that's like, he literally gave up, he kept on saying he gave up everything that he had and he passed away, and then for you to be able to do this. So you're kind of wondering like, okay, what's the background stuff here? What exactly are they addressing that they're saying? That did his dad sell his soul? Did he sell his body for the sake of his son being successful? And that's the part that wasn't literal translated that I really liked, because there's some stuff that I think then they tell me that I'm like, well, I didn't need to know that, and we'll get into that in a second. But that, and then I really like how much the idea of him finally meeting him, and it's a whole idea of never meet your heroes, never meet your idols, but then he sort of takes away and learns from him, because it ends with that final showdown where constantly throughout the movie, Marlon Wayans' character is like, I'm gonna go watch film, and then he's just watching it, and then it's just all of his fans like praising him and like looking at him, and it's in the shape of an eye, which beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I'm assuming is what that means, because he ends up being really like superficial in what he wants in the first place, because he feels like he's like, I am the greatest. He has like this ego trip to him in the second half of the movie for sure. So you're kind of wondering like, okay, so this entire time was he just going, he wasn't even like watching himself improve or anything like that. He was just like, oh, here's all these adoring people. And then it ends up being a thing where he's kind of contradicting himself, because he's saying you're seeking the validation from strangers, of people that you don't know because your dad didn't love you. And yet he's spending all of his time watching someone who, or all these people that they don't know who he is. They're not actual people that he knows, and yet he feels the praise from them. And it's why it's starting to piece together towards the end that maybe that's why he's doing it. But then you're also kind of like, but you yourself said that you shouldn't be chasing this as your whole thing. You shouldn't be chasing the idea that people like want to love you overall, right? Do it of your own accord. Do it for a better reason internally, to have that drive to be the best. And there's this consistent motif of him also putting his own blood into Tyriq Withers, which could have be construed as maybe a thing on steroids as well. I do think that if you're noticing that I think that this movie is saying a lot, it is. Is it maybe saying too much? That might be a negative I might have. It might have needed to focus up a little bit or just be longer. I think that it's really, really well done for as long as it's sustained, and then it just ends. Like the ending we'll get into, but I think that since it is about so much, I could have taken genuinely another half hour of this. I also think that it's about, like we said, it's about the false idols thing and the giving up your own body, but I also think it's kind of about how much the athletes are trying to please just these people that they own these teams for millions of dollars, and they're sort of like, they're money makers, really. I know that athletes get paid a lot, but to the extent of whatever they're putting their body through, right? And I think that showing those training scenes that are brutal and hard to watch at times, and it's done with such a visual style, because one thing that I think that is really executed in this movie is, by the way, it has an amazing soundtrack. I think the soundtrack in this is so good. And then it sort of steers into kind of this music video aesthetic, which I didn't mind. I thought that it was kind of going for something heightened and stylized, because there's a recurring thing that I really like, that at one point he is shown in an x-ray early on. The staples in his head are literally in the shape of a football. That's the kind of symbolism that we're dealing with here. I think that it's one of those, like, I've described this before on this show as, oh, well, there's a literal like paperback feeling of it where you're reading this, and that's how I feel. It feels like, you'd find a 12-page short story, and it would be like, it would offhandedly mention, oh, this football player got the scar on the side of his head, but like the stitches are literally in the shape of a football. And it'd be one of those offhanded details that they mention, and you'd be like, oh, okay. And then for like literary reasons, we'd be cool with it. But in movies, sometimes I think that we're like, you don't have to spoon feed that information to me, but I like it. It's an interesting visual choice that I think to stick with. And then one other thing that I really liked in this was that X-ray also leads to, there's a moment where I mentioned earlier where they like bang heads, and then the X-ray, like you can see the crack in the skull develop even further, and which is why I think that he hallucinates even further into it. I still don't know. I think that if you can find people that also like this movie, I think that there's a lot to say and talk to about it. What's real, what's not real. And I think that one other thing that I really liked in this was the idea of fan culture, of stans, and how obsessive they can be about a celebrity. I like that when he first shows up, there's this group of people, they look like they're from Mad Max, and then this woman is, older, and I think she's older. They don't really kind of clarify her age or anything like that. She's just done up with a lot of makeup, and she looks crazy, and she like spits on the car. She's like, we don't want you, and then somehow, this is one of the creepiest images in the movie, you can see them crawl under through the sauna that he's in, Tyriq Withers is, and then they attempt to kill him, but then Marlon Wayans literally kills her while they're like freaking out, and then he's like cackling to himself. He's like, that's dedication right there. He's like, that, I love my fans. And then he like kisses her and then kills her after that. And it's just this like, what are we watching? What is going on? And it felt weird for the sake of being otherworldly, kind of, because then you're like, okay, and Tyriq Withers, I think, since there's a justified thing happening here. Do I think it's weird that he seems to be rolling with everything? Yes, but part of me also wonders, if you were to meet your idol in like a world like this is an exaggerated version of it as well, but if you were to meet your idol and they were like, this is all the things you got to do to be great, and would you be like, okay, yeah, no, I'm not going to question you, because you're clearly like, they said he won 8 quote-unquote Super Bowl rings. Here it's XLFF or like some fictional thing, but that's what they're alluding to. And part of you wonders like, well, okay, but if you did meet that person, how far are you willing to go to also prove to yourself, like, I can be great, I can be this next great person like my idol is? And then he ends up being his own demise towards the end, because he usurps him after the fact, and then he beats him with like the helmet, and then he says the whole idea, and then like the helmet literally shines, which is like, the chosen one thing. It felt like a pulling the sword out of the rock, that thing, and then it glows. This is the sort of imagery we're dealing with here, right? And I liked all this. It's definitely in your face and over the top, but why not? And I think that then towards the end, if we're going to really get into my negatives, the ending doesn't fit the rest of the movie, which is why I think maybe some people left kind of confused about it. For me, it felt like it turned kind of, I think that part of the reason why maybe this movie, people want to go see it, but then they're like, what is this? Is it's not super mainstream in execution. It's very heightened. And then the ending seems to want to go into a Hollywood ending, give you that full-on payoff of like, oh, he murders all the people and walks away. And then like it's presented as this one idea of people had some theory. They're like, oh, he's going to sell his soul, but he turns away from that. He doesn't sign the contract that they're offering him. And I thought that was actually kind of a smart inversion, but then it like doesn't have it weirdly has an unsatisfying ending because it tries to have a satisfying ending. It's trying to like, okay, now I'm going to get the comeuppance of everybody that's in the situation. Like Julia Fox, who's really good in this, and Tim Heidecker, who's in this as well, who, before we expand a little bit more on that, I want to say is really good but also has a line of dialogue that I thought was unnecessary, where he's like, we literally groomed you. Like, literally says this. And in hindsight, though, I also like that this is about that, because it's about like how much of your life, if you're one of the athletes growing up, dedicating yourself to this, like people saying that they like groom you for greatness or anything like that, what part of if you're like an athlete like that, is the childhood worth losing over you thinking that like you need to remove everything in your life, just the pure hard work, the pure dedication? And they essentially induct you into this, and then like you're an athlete your whole life. It reminded me of the Williams, the tennis players as well, a little bit, like how in that movie, I admittedly don't know their story outside of the movie, but their entire lives they spent dedicated to this sport, to this craft, to this thing. But then it's also the argument of, would these people be this good? Like, would athletes be this good if they didn't go to that lengths? And that's up for debate. I think that this movie is not trying to answer any questions. I think it's trying to spark interest and have you question what it's saying instead of having any direct answers for you. And I like that a lot. I like that commentary about possible recruiters as well, about your dad even like sacrificing himself for you to have the things you want. They say that like he gave that up. But then the ending itself, I liked all the faceless cheerleaders. Their faces were blurred out. You couldn't tell, maybe it was like a net. I couldn't really tell, but it looked really cool. And so you're wondering, like, okay, the imagery, the bright sky on the football field, and all of that was really well done. But then I think that since it's like, let's murder everyone and have him do all these one-liners all at the end, you're kind of like, well, hang on. If we're going to do that, like, this is the ending, then I want a clear answer where he goes after that. I'm not even a person that needs a not ambiguous ending. I'm all for having an ambiguous ending to argue about, especially in horror movies that seem to do that a fair amount these days, which is totally fine. But if we're going to steer off into having a clear, straightforward ending, then I kind of want to know where he goes after that. He just sort of walks off. Is he going to become an athlete? Is he going to go home and be like, oh, well, no, we're all good? Or was everything fictional in his head? Was this him sort of spiraling? And I didn't mean to do that. Was this him sort of spiraling and kind of being like, taking everything literal because he's sort of in and out of consciousness? The fact that it's having me question that at all, though, is really smart, I think. And you can argue about this for days. If you didn't like this movie, I totally get it. I definitely also came out of it being like, if you hated it, I'm not going to argue with you that I think you should have loved it. It's totally fine for you to have a separate interpretation as well. But I think that I came with a lot out of it. I think that it has a lot of interesting things to say about grooming for athletes in that world, for idolizing celebrities, and for athletes. And also, let's touch on one more thing. I think that the whole idea of football as a religion, I think it's a study of kind of like America is so obsessed with this that we're like the mascots and like the teams, and this is our team, and we dedicate our lives to this if we're a gigantic fan of something. I think it's just about fan culture as well, but obviously specifically football. And yes, there's a scene where my audience groaned, but I liked it. I mean, because it's so in your face. There's a scene where they literally recreate The Last Supper, right? With Tyriq Withers in the middle. And you're like, okay, I see exactly where this is going and what we're doing. Is it symbolism that's spelled out? Yeah, absolutely. But I ended up really liking the execution of it. But the negatives are that I think what it wants to say is really clever and really smart, but also need to be a bit more fleshed out. And just the ending, like the ending part of it, I think could have been reworked a little bit, because then it sort of is like, let's kill everyone and like let's end it with him saying one-liners, and the blood is like I love that stuff. But then for once, if I'm saying, like, I don't think the gore needed to be the direction that we needed to take this. But overall, if you're going to ask me, do I think this is worth seeing? Yes, for sure. Even if you hate it, two of the people that I were in my theater walked out and they never came back, but I think they left at the midway point. And I saw some people saying that it takes a turn halfway through. I don't know if I agree with that, only because I felt like it was headed a clear direction and stayed that clear direction the entire time. But I know that it definitely, in the ending part of it, takes a turn where you're like, okay, well, no, wait, back up, because we were doing one thing and now we're doing a complete other thing. But overall, I'm in the minority on this. I think that this movie is really good. I think that it has some really interesting stuff to say about football and about sports and American culture. And honestly, I'm coming away with this like, I like this movie a lot. I think that not everything works, but also I don't want a sequel or anything, but I would like to have, maybe there's a director's cut out there. I'd love if there was one, just that's like a half hour longer that just, explains everything even more. It has more on its mind. I'd love that. And if we're going to go into marketing things really quick, I think that Universal marketing this as Jordan Peele and his name being plastered everywhere does not help the case for this movie. They gotta stop doing that. There are still people that think Candyman was directed by Jordan Peele, and it wasn't. He just produced that. I know that that's a strategy. I know that, Steven Spielberg produced the Transformers movies. He actually had a hand in the first one, but the rest, he's just like, I don't know if he was just like, he was on set one day and he was like, looks good to me, and then just walked off and did something else. But I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I think that kind of gives false expectation, and you're going to go into it expecting a kind of movie, because he does have a style, and this has an adjacent style. You can tell that Jordan Peele, why he would want this, because he liked this movie himself. I like this movie. I think it'll develop a fan base over a course of time, but we'll see. Overall, though, I'm going to give this a score, and I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. I think it's really, really, really good. I think that it has some issues, but I think that the stuff that's so strong is straight up great. I think that Marlon Wayans is great, Tyriq Withers is great, the cinematography is incredible, and it has a lot of interesting commentary. But what did you guys think of him? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. If you hated it, please, let's get the comments started. I want to see why. Don't call anybody dumb in the comments, but I want to see why we liked this, why we didn't like it, what things there are to come away with this from. I think it's a more interesting movie in the sense that since there's so much to talk about, I want to hear the different takes and why. But up next, oh boy, it's going to start steering into reward season, isn't it? I'm so unbelievably excited for this movie. This is going to be a review for Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another with Leonardo DiCaprio, Chase Infinity, and I'm blanking on the name right now, Regina Hall. But I am so excited for that. I cannot wait to talk about it. That's one of my favorite directors ever. One of my favorite actors ever, if not my favorite actor. But that's going to be for next week. As for now, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. And again, if you could, like, comment, subscribe. Also, find me on TikTok at Somewhere Between Pod. Make a lot of videos on there as well. Thank you guys. I'll see you next time.